How do you manage? How do you take control of? And how do you keep your thoughts in order? What method do you use? Hello, everybody. My name is Persohn. You can contact me at pastor@mascot.church or in the comments below. Probably going to start a playlist dedicated to something that has really actually changed my life for the better in the last little while. About 6 months ago, I came across a concept called Zettelkasten. Zettelkasten, not Zettelkasting, like I said in the earlier video when I was all rushed from interstate. A Zettel is a card, and usually 3x5, and a cast is a box. Basically, it's a German compound word that means cards in a box. And I was very intrigued by the presentation that I saw, and I thought this could be useful for me and maybe for others, whatever. I'll put you'll get in the description, you'll be able to go and search for Zettelkasten and get more experienced people talking about it. But this has been very, very valuable to me. I can't talk about how, I can't really say enough good things about how it's affected my ability to record information and so on and so forth. So first of all, what really is this whole approach? How does it work? What do you do with it? Fundamentally, the idea that the Zettelkasten approach deals with is this whole thought of atomized thoughts. That is, that you have a thought in your mind that stands alone. It's kind of atomized, and it doesn't know where to land. And this might happen when you're reading, or it might happen when you're just doing something else, or you're watching TV, or you're driving, or whatever. And you know that thought is valuable. You know that line you just read is valuable, but it doesn't connect to anything specifically. So the Zettelkasten concept was developed by a German scholar years ago, essentially says, well, what we're going to do is we're going to write this in an atomized form. I'm going to write it in my own handwriting, and I'm going to just record it and do some things with it and just keep it on its own. So the points that you would consider, first of all, is the date. Now, all of my Zettels begin with what you might call is a variation of the Julian date. So, for example, the 10th of April this year, 2022, the date on the top says 20220410. And the first note of the day is either 1 or A. I've now moved to alphas over time. And there was a note when I was reading the book of Job, which in Job chapter 29:13, which mentions that the ostrich, or teaches that the ostrich, or a bird, or an animal, is not rational. I thought, that's really, really interesting. Now I looked at that and thought, what a great thought. But I didn't have anything to connect it to. Now, had I put it in a notebook, it would have been all right, but you'd have to troll the notebook to find the thought, and then it kind of is gone. However, there are several interesting things that happen when you simply put it on a card like this. You can probably see, I don't know, ostrich not rational. Doesn't really matter. The first thing is that I can take this card and I can associate it with several different elements. I can lay it on my table, and maybe I'm talking about the creation. You know, God as creator of all things. God is the necessary being. And I look at that. Or maybe we're talking about sin. Or maybe we're talking about relationships or whatever. I can use this atomized thought and I can slide it into the conversation. That's really, really valuable. That's really valuable. Hey, if you like these videos, like, share, subscribe. You know the story. You know the drill. Always forget to, not always, sometimes I forget to do that. Sometimes I do a recut of the video where I don't say it. And I think, oh no, the video won't go anywhere. No, bit OCD. Now, so that's really valuable. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that once I've taken that thought and I've put it on a Zettel, I put it on a card, something happens in my mind where I know I'm going to be comfortable getting it back. I know I'm going to be comfortable retrieving it. It doesn't sit there cluttering in my mind. I've taken it kind of out there. That's also interesting. Oftentimes you have this, you ever felt very scatterbrained? You got one thought after another, after another. Well, that really is something that has been tremendously helped with this Zettel process that I've been using. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about here is that I don't have very good penmanship, but I write these all in my own handwriting. I can look at the handwriting on the day and determine what kind of mental place I was at. Not everybody Well, I think you can all do that. You can say, well, I really scribbled this. I must have been in a rush, or I must not have been thinking. So that's interesting. The next thing that we need to consider is that each one of these needs to be an atomized thought, that is, just a single thought that can stand on its own. So, for example, the phrase, ostrich not rational, that can stand on its own, just like that, and the reference from Job. Interesting, okay? So I'm not writing multiple points. I've come to learn over time that if I had multiple points, ostrich not rational, leopard can't change its spots, right? Those are two. They're getting two cards. They're getting two cards. It's two related but slightly different thoughts. Okay, so the first card of the day would be 20220410. Now it's A. Used to be -1, and the second one B, and so on. Now that I'm in that mode, something else has happened. It's very interesting. So I'm off in the morning on my run, and I have a great thought. Okay, and I know that the day is the 9th of July. That's when I'm recording this, and I think I have a great thought. How am I going to keep that thought? Within a couple of minutes, that thought will be gone. It's what's called a fleeting thought. But it was important. It might be important for work, for marriage, for church, for anything. Who knows? But you know that thought's important. It's like, because I'm now in Zettel mode, I go to in my mind, I say I do the date, 2022-07-09, 2022-07-09A. I've got an association. I repeat the thought to myself a couple of times. By the time I get home, I haven't forgotten it because I'm in that mode now and I can record the thought. I'll need to go over it a couple of times while I'm running, but that's all good. Then it becomes Zettel becomes a card when I arrive home. And that's cool. Now, you can also do it by sending an email to yourself or something along the way. You're doing that. The main point is to atomize the thoughts and do them. Now, people who practice this and really push it hard review their cards, their Zettels, every day. And then they categorize them further. I have not yet found that to be necessary, but probably over time. The way that you would do this is if you've done, let's say, 25 or 30 in a day. I haven't ever done that many, but well, maybe I've come close in some days. What you'd do then is you'd mark them off as maybe this one is theology, this one is cooking, and this one is whatever. Probably where it will go for me in the future is to go through and color code these and maybe put them in their own little dedicated card box. I bought this little box of cards here. I bought 3 of them earlier on this year, and then when I bought them, I thought maybe they're too small, and maybe the paper is too flimsy, and so on, and maybe I should use 3x5 cards. I actually found that these worked really well with this paper. I don't use every one of them. I might bring out 4 or 5 at a time so I can write on them and just toss the others, or they just sit at the beginning of the box and I'll toss them eventually because they get a bit worn. But it's just enough paper. It's just about the right size. And it's enough to hold an atomized thought. Do I go double-sided? Sometimes. If the thought is a little bit larger, I might clip them together. Haven't yet had to do that. So that's another kind of advantage with this whole process. Now, what you really get is the ability to hold an atomized thought and to reuse them. You'll find that the way your mind works is the thoughts that you have, those atomized, fleeting thoughts, are very effective in multiple disciplines in your life. And the problem with putting them in a notebook is the notebook tends to have a single discipline model. Now, there is software that does the job. I've looked at it. I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is you've got to log on to the software. You've got to do your thing. You need to be against an appliance that always works. And you lose the ability to look at the quality of your handwriting to determine what mental state you're in. The other thing that you can do here, of course, in a handwritten card is you can, as you write it, circle important words. You can put a little star. You can note them. You can say, you can make comments that are a little further and a little easier to do. You can put a little artifact on the card that means something to you at a later time. And so that's important. Okay, that's also useful. So what has this done and where will I go? Well, first of all, it has served to settle a lot of the background noise in my mind. And I think that might be useful for a lot of my audience as well. Some of those background fleeting thoughts, once they're put on a card and once they're out of the way, become your servant rather than your master. In life, we talk about this all the time, and I mention it as a pastor frequently. You really can determine the quality of your life by looking at what is your servant and what is your master. And sometimes these scattered, valuable thoughts in your head have become your master, and they've begun to control your life. Now, this process has helped me to get that down and significantly reduce the noise. It's also helped me to think more clearly. I think sometimes the need to hold some of these thoughts and to keep working is because something on the inside of you says, I can't forget this. This is really vital, but it doesn't know how to use that. The other thing that it has done, and it's definitely worked this way, it has improved my creativity. Because you see, I'll store these little thoughts together and I'll realize that my mind is producing those creative thoughts all the time. I just don't know what to do with them. But when I've got them out on paper, I say, wow, look at this. I now understand it. Okay? Now, how will I categorize these? Ultimately, going forward, I mentioned color coding or whatever, I will probably group them into a number of core categories. Probably there will be work, and then there's going to be theology, and then there's going to be philosophy, and so on. I'll just group them like that. And that will mean that I can kind of ring fence them. But I've also found that some of those things that I've learned work even across the disciplines. Okay? So what we're just talking about today is a quick look at a thing called Zettelkasten, an approach that I have used. I actually consider these little notes here now, and this is so interesting, to be amongst the most valuable things that I own. Fascinating, isn't it? It's like these are the things that were here that are now, here, that are just that important. It's funny that a few small pieces of paper have had that value for me. Really fascinating. The other thing that I've noticed is by laying them out, I've realized all of the things that I have easily and would otherwise have easily forgotten. So that's curious. Okay? I better end now. What is my time? 12 minutes. Okay? Zettelkasten. It's the cards in a box. A really, really interesting way to look at life and the world and your memories. I might do some more on these. If you're interested in some more input, let me know. I might put a small playlist together and just give you some of my thoughts and so on. But I found it made a big difference to my world and so on. And I hope it does to you as well. My name is Persohn. You can contact me at pastor@mascot.church or in the comments below. God bless you. We will talk again soon.